Was an IRS agent, and he switched. He defected from the IRS. And but he did a thorough work. We worked with Free Enterprise Society, with Freedom Law School, Bill Conklin, Larry B. Kraft, Bill Benson, others. He has a very unique story to tell you. Why would somebody leave a nice, secure government job, paying $76,000 a year, plus government car, plus full benefits, when you have wife and 2 kids and a mortgage, leave it without no prospect of another job in the wings? Why would an IRS agent on conscience alone do that? Well, you have to judge for yourself. But this man done a lot for the freedom movement, and at Freedom Law School, we were proud to have him as one of our students. In fact, I was the first one to meet him back in 1998. In fact, this hotel was the very first time he came public at our Freedom Rally back in March of '99 and told the whole world his story. Let's please give a warm hand of welcome to former fraud expert, special agent, CPA, with the IRS, and our great freedom fighter, Mr. Joe Banister.
How's everybody doing? I'm not a former fraud expert. I just investigated a little bigger target. I have to apologize. I'm not afraid of the IRS. I mean, there's reasons to fear the IRS. I'm not afraid of them, but I'm afraid of my spouse getting mad at me if I don't catch a flight at 5:45. And so I have to leave here at about 5 o'clock, and I've got a nice gentleman that's going to escort me there. So anyway, I have to apologize for that. So I'll try to get through the story. And maybe just to make it efficient, how many people know the gist of my story? Boy, it's going to be a short speech. Well, then there's a lot of stuff I can bypass, I would say. But I guess I would start by saying that, it's probably clear to you that I wasn't bashful in my feelings about the Constitution and defending it. And I'll tell you a funny story. When I was an agent, we all had our little cubicle, and in my cubicle, everybody knew that I was a pro-Second Amendment guy and knew the gun control issue and the Second Amendment Constitution, and they definitely knew where I stood because I had 2 bumper stickers that were pasted to my wall. One said, "Fear the government that fears your guns," and the other said, "The experts agree gun control works," and there was a picture of Gaddafi, Hitler, Castro, and who was the other guy? It wasn't Clinton, Stalin. There you go. There was only room for 4, so they couldn't put Clinton up there. But so and that was in the IRS office. So I was not bashful about the Constitution. I just at that point didn't realize. I guess I hadn't gotten from the Second Amendment to the 16th Amendment, but that changed during my career. Maybe what I'll do then is just tell you that I spent 3 years of really happiness and contentment as a criminal investigator for the IRS from January of '94. I started November of '93, but trained in January '94 through February of '99 is when I left. But the first 3 years of my career, I really enjoyed what I did. And I don't want you to think that I was so heartless that I enjoyed, turning people upside down and shaking them by the ankles and seeing how many coins fell out. People do, there are taxes that are legitimate and mandatory, and people cheat on them. And that's the reason that I took the job. I don't like cheaters. But about the 3-year point in my career, you know, I was listening to a talk radio show, which I had listened to for a couple of years prior to that, and I heard this lady named D.V. Kidd talk about the income tax. And that was kind of the beginning of the end of my contentment phase with the IRS. And I spent 2 years trying to disprove this radical, unbelievable, incredible claim that the law doesn't require you to file income tax returns and pay income tax. I just couldn't believe it could be true. You know, how can the IRS have issued me a 6-hour 9mm handgun, 13 rounds in the magazine and 1 in the chamber, give me shotgun training, issue me a bulletproof vest, give me handcuffs, train me on how to kick people and punch people and do all these law enforcement techniques if indeed the income tax wasn't even mandatory to be paid. I just couldn't believe it could be true. But I put on, you know, I had investigative skills. I learned from the IRS how to do those kinds of investigations. So I set about trying to investigate whether or not this claim about, you know, what you've been hearing all of today and you'll hear tomorrow is actually true. And I guess one of the reasons I probably give the IRS fits is that it's common, or it's been a common reasoning or propaganda tool for the IRS to tell people that, oh, anybody that talks about these issues about the income tax, it's wishful thinking. Well, that doesn't really work with me, because I got the job voluntarily and I enjoyed it, and I was intending to spend a full 20 years there. So that if there was any wishful thinking at all, it was that I wished that it wasn't true. But the evidence was plain and it was staring me right in the face. Another thing the IRS will say is that, you know, the only people that pay attention to these issues are people that are anti-government. That doesn't stick with me either. My father spent 30 years with the city of San Jose in the Public Works Department. I have relatives who are police officers. I'm not anti-government or anti-tax. Another thing that they might say is that, you know, well, the people that talk about this don't have any degrees. They don't have any letters after their name. They don't have any, you know, relevant experience. And those things don't work either with me. So I'm sure that the IRS has been spending lots of time. They're trying to find something, some new weapon to use against people, but the weapons that have been so useful for so long aren't working as well. And when you listen to Bob Scholes and his information, and I'll get into it a little bit in my talk as well, you're going to see the credibility factor. It should have been there all along. I mean, when you listen to people like Steve Hempling, Charles Key, you know, you name it, all the speakers that are here, you can tell that they know what they're talking about. They have the evidence to back it up. But, you know, they may not have 2 or 3 letters after their name. So you name it. Many of the weapons in the IRS's arsenal are slowly being neutralized because they're basically lies and myths. And I don't think those old tools aren't going to last much longer. But it took me about 2 years to really come to the conclusion that, wow, this is really true. And not only is it true, but the government, the policymakers in the IRS know that it's true. And they're constantly trying to find ways to you know, put Band-Aids on the system to hold it together, to continue the fraud. I remember, you know, I'd see different pieces of evidence that would just drive me bananas, or I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe my own eyes. I remember seeing the list of the kinds of systems of records that the IRS would keep on people. And there was one particular system of records that kept tabs on U.S. District Court judges, U.S. attorneys, and IRS special agents. Now, what do you think they keep a list like that for? Well, according to the printout, they had to put all this information, they had to disclose it to the public, was that they kept criminal investigation files. They kept financial information on these officials. And I used to be one of those officials, so I imagine they might have some information on me. I don't suppose they might try to use that information if I went sideways, which actually I've gone a lot more than sideways. But, but something like that is very frightening, to have a list like that that they could use to keep the system going, even though perhaps it's not legitimate. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that table that's in the Code of Federal Regulations, where it shows the equivalent forms that conform to a particular regulation. And there's a section 1.1-1. You're probably well aware that section 1 is where all of the tax rates are, and that's where they tell you that the tax is imposed. And you look for the corresponding form for regulation 1.1-1, and it's a 2555 form, foreign earned income. That seemed very strange to me. I've learned since leaving the IRS that they have a system of records that they use and manipulate called the individual master file. How many people have heard of the individual master file? Maybe 15, 20%? For those of you that never heard of it, it's the system, a computerized system that the IRS uses to keep track of any payments you make, any returns that you file, any kind of activity that an agent will do on your case or your file. And I come to find out that they manipulate that computer system in order to fool the computer into treating you as someone who's required to file tax returns and pay the income tax. Now that's something I learned after resigning, but suffice it to say, the picture that I've been able to paint in my mind just gets worse and worse for the IRS and better for our side. And I know that's because our side is telling the truth. But it took about 2 years, and mainly because I didn't, just stop doing everything and begin reading. I had, I have two boys and a wife, and we've been married 15 years. I had soccer coaching duties and helping my kids with their homework and working 50 hours a week as a special agent. But I wanted to keep at it, and I wanted to determine whether or not what I was doing was within the law. Well, when it came near the end of the 2-year period, I had convinced myself that I was certain that there was a big problem here, and I was also certain that I needed to do something about it. And if you'll recall, I mentioned, I think I mentioned DV Kidd, and how it was her radio appearance that got me started on this road. So, as Paimon mentioned, during the 2-year period, here you have a badge-carrying IRS agent that when he's going home at night, he's talking to people like Bill Benson, calling Bill Conklin, receiving calls from Larry Beecraft, just doing all of these terribly scurrilous things like talking to these people. But what was happening was they were sharing with me solid evidence, which is what I loved, because that's what an investigator likes to accumulate. But in talking to DV Kidd and telling her, that I've basically reached the conclusion that your claims were absolutely correct. And Devi wasn't impressed. And if you've ever heard Devi talk, you know her demeanor. She's a great lady. But she said, "Okay, fine. Well, what are you going to do about it?" And I felt like it was my mother. And not, she's a beautiful lady and she looks like she's barely over 30, but I mean, just the way she said it to me, I thought, "Okay, Mom, don't worry. I'm going to do the right thing." And I said, "Well, Devi, I set out on this investigation with the intent that whatever I found out to be the truth, I was going to speak up about it. And if I found out that your claims that you made on Jeff Metcalf's show were untrue, then I was going to speak up about that, and I was going to tell everybody that you were a liar. But if I in some way found out that the agency I worked for wasn't telling the truth, then I was going to speak up and tell people that they were lying." And so she was happy with that answer. And so I set out trying to figure out, well, okay, there's no books I can buy that tell me what to do about this problem. And so I just, I did some thinking and some praying, and I realized that I had a moral, ethical, and constitutional duty to accumulate my evidence and submit it to my supervisors and ask for them to review it. And so in early February of 1999, I had finished accumulating the highlights of my evidence, and I put it into the form of a report. It was about 95 pages long. And I submitted it with a letter to my immediate supervisor. He was my group manager. And I said basically that, I've got a degree in accounting. I'm a certified public accountant. He trusts me to carry this gun and a badge around, even on airplanes and prisons, going to prisons and interviewing people, and, a tremendous amount of trust in me. And I'm sorry to report that I've done some investigating and I don't like what I see. Now, perhaps I've made a mistake, and if you can show me the error of my analysis, then I'll just go on with my job. But all I ask is that you, who perhaps know more than me or are more experienced than me or have more advanced degrees than me, can show me where I went wrong. And I thought that was a pretty reasonable request. I had 5.5 years on the job. I had progressed to grade 13, which is the highest grade you can make before getting into management. I did it in 4.5 years. I had numerous awards. I was an expert in firearms. I was a firearms instructor. I did good casework. I trained other agents. I really tried hard, and I liked my job, and I did well at it. So I felt that the least they could do was talk to me about it. But I soon found out that was too much to ask. So I submitted my report to my immediate supervisor, and he submitted it to my chief. And my chief called me into the office, and he said, "Joe, are you really serious about this?" And I said, "Chief, I'm dead serious about this. This is an extremely important issue, and I've done all the due diligence I can do, and I see a big problem here. So I expect that you can help me resolve it, and then I can get back to doing my job." So, in compliance with my request, my chief said, "Well, if you're serious about this, then I'll go ahead and do what you ask." And he submitted my report up the chain of command. And he did tell me verbally that it went as high as the assistant commissioner for the Criminal Investigation Division. The only person higher than that guy is the commissioner himself. And it didn't take very long for me to be called back into my chief's office. And he provided me with a very short memorandum. And the memorandum stated, in so many words, that the IRS would not be responding to my report and would provide me with the necessary paperwork to tender my resignation. They didn't want to talk about it at all. Now, the man that I submitted my report to had taken the same oath that I did. In fact, he went to the same Catholic high school that I did. In fact, I thought he believed everything I believed about the Constitution, about authority, about a lot of things. But he didn't feel compelled to do anything more than what he was doing, which was nothing. My chief took the same oath. He came from the East Coast, so I don't know what his background was, but it was enough to have taken the same oath that I did. I'm sure the person above my chief took the same oath, and the person above him or her, and above him or her, all the way up to the assistant commissioner. But apparently, what I had done was not acceptable, and what they felt was acceptable was to send me packing. So in the memorandum, in the last paragraph, it said that they would be sending me home on administrative leave, and I had 7 days to consider what my next. So they took my badge. No, they took my gun. They didn't take my badge that day, and sent me home. And my chief, I guess he was trying to be kind to me. He said, Joe, when you go to sign out in the sign out book, because the agents, are out in the field all the time, and so you're supposed to kind of let your boss know where you're at. And he said, when you sign yourself out in the book, you can just put leave, L-E-A-V-E. And that was the term that we used for, being off the clock, so to speak. He didn't want me to put administrative leave, because that would have a negative connotation to the other agents. And so when I went to the book to sign out, I put administrative leave in the biggest letters that I could. And I also, I took my bumper stickers, and I took all my photographs, and I took every piece of, personal memorabilia and things on my desk, and got out the pledge and dusted it off, and it was empty. So the next morning, after I had gone home, my pager, which was one of the things they didn't take from me, was going off like crazy. And I come to find out that the agents who came into the office the next morning, you can imagine as you go into your office and you're looking around and like, wow, looks like somebody died over there. I mean, there's nothing on the desk, there's nothing on the walls. Where's Joe? And everybody was just appalled. Of course, now they thought that I'd been caught doing something with the secretary, or went to get some milk in my government car, or did something really bad. And they were a little, the agents that called me were a little surprised when I told them what the problem was. But that seemed to be kind of the extent of it. There were a few agents that seemed a little concerned, but apparently there was no one that made any big waves or really questioned what happened. Why did an agent with 5.5 years on the job just disappear? So over time, I think they've come to learn why, and learn a little more about me, what I'm made of. And that was a tough time. Once the administrative leave period ended, what's kind of funny is the timing of it all. When I had talked to Bill Benson and learned about the 16th Amendment, I learned that the 16th Amendment was proclaimed to be ratified on February 25th of 1913. And my birthday is actually February 25th, 1963. And the point at which I resigned was they had scheduled it to be February 26th of 1999. And so I had to decide whether I wanted to get an extra day of pay and wait till the 26th, which was their day, or resign a day early on the 25th, which was my day. And so I came in on the 25th, and I submitted my resignation letter, which, by the way, you can view at freedomabovefortune.com, which is my website. And I wrote a letter to Commissioner Rosati, and I told him that I was very much confused at the treatment I had received, that my intention was to get these issues resolved, that there was no, I didn't involve any media. There was no fanfare. It was simply an agent that did his due diligence and came to a conclusion that there were some problems. And I thought, that in talking to other people who had taken the same oath that I did, and who I thought had the same morals and ethics that I did, would be somewhat receptive to the possibility that people's rights were being violated and that people's property was being taken under color of law. That people were sitting in jail because of actions taken under color of law. I came to find out that they don't care. Nonetheless, I walked out of there on February 25th, and I'd do the same thing all over again. Even being a federal agent, I was paranoid. I thought, oh, am I going to be followed by dark-suited people in black cars? And this can't be very, very good. This is kind of a career-limiting move for me. What's going to happen? And I believe that one of the things I needed to do was get publicity. And for some strange reason, ABC News, CBS, NBC, San Jose Mercury News, they weren't interested in my story. Not that I was surprised after reading DV Kids booklets, but nonetheless, I needed publicity. So I through the help of a good person named Bruce White, who you're actually going to hear speak, I believe tomorrow, I got a website up and running, and I'm happy to report that about 500,000 people have visited it since March of 1999. Last time we checked, there were 40,000 people that had downloaded my report from my website. And so that's been successful. When you can't get publicity from Peter Jennings and Tom Brokaw, you get it any way you can. I've been on over 100 radio shows, and the talk show hosts have been fantastic in allowing me to tell my story, and for some reason it seems to interest people. That the IRS, wouldn't answer one of their own special agents. And the failure of the IRS not to answer has been a recurring problem. And it's been gratifying to me because I'll give you a little anecdote to emphasize the point. After I left, I can't remember if it was 6 months later or 8 months later, but I called the first boss that I worked for in the San Francisco office, and I tried to just kind of mend fences, or at least explain to him, Alex, I really am a good guy, and I'm not trying to make trouble for anybody, but I really had some serious questions I believe they needed to be answered. And he said, "They don't need to answer you, Joe." And that really hurt, hearing him say that. That here was a career, 30-year agent, former Marine, and he was so brainwashed that he could look at an agent that he himself trained, that he used to, say good things about me, say that I was an incredible agent and investigator. But once I started asking these questions, I was a nincompoop, and the government didn't need to answer me. So that was the mentality that was shared, I'm sure, by most of the people that I work with. Well, I had the extreme good fortune to be invited on a particular talk radio show out of the 100 or so that I've been on, and it was hosted by a man named Bob Schulz. How many people have heard of Bob Schulz? Quite a bit. Bob had a show, and he said, you know, he'll tell the story probably, and I don't want to take his thunder, so maybe I'll just tell you my side of it, my perspective. But he got this email saying that there was this IRS special agent who confronted the IRS about the legitimacy of the administration of the income tax, and they told him to resign rather than answer him. And he was familiar with government corruption, so he decided to have me on his show. And up to that point, he had no idea about this income tax issue. He had, he knew that the government could be up to no good, but more on the New York State level, the local level. So he was fascinated by this possibility, and so he had me on his show, and I talked to him just the way I'm talking to you now, and he said, "Wow, I mean, he talked to me after the show and said, 'You are so believable. I mean, you're really telling the truth. This really happened to you.'" And they really wouldn't answer. And I said, "Yeah." It amazes me too. So what is amazing is that what Bob did is, it really bothered him. I mean, it bothered me a great deal. But I came to find out how much it bothered Bob. That they wouldn't, by the way, I learned while I did my investigation that they don't answer you either. So, Bob came to learn this, and he's thinking, gosh, they won't listen to the public, and they won't even listen to one of their own special agents who, they have trouble discrediting because he's got some pretty decent credentials and a good track record. They won't even listen to him. They won't even answer him, talk about it in any manner. So what Bob did is he decided, well, let's have a symposium at the National Press Club and invite the government officials, and we'll have it at the press club that's only blocks away from the government offices. Surely they can spare a bureaucrat to come and answer these questions. Well, Bob gave them 2 months of advanced notice, gave them formal invitations, and when I say them, I mean the Treasury Department, the Internal Revenue Service, the House, the Senate, the Clinton administration, Department of Justice, you name it. He sent them invitations 2 months in advance. Then a month in advance, he sent out invitations again because he didn't receive any responses from the first ones. No response. This was January 1st and 2nd of 1999. Now, of course, I was a little bit hurt that they wouldn't answer me. So I was thinking, wow, we're finally going to get some answers. I continue to be naive, I guess. And so the day came, and no government showed. And I thought, well, at least there's a pattern developing here. And I thought about that first boss, Alex. And I thought, so, they're not supposed to answer the public. They're not supposed to answer me. And now they're not answering the We the People Foundation. Where's this going to go? So fortunately, C-SPAN 2 did show up. And they televised the event live. And so what we thought would be just a small session to get some answers turned into a nationally televised event. And even my cousin in the Midwest called me and said, "Joe, I saw you on TV." We were amazed at that kind of coverage. C-SPAN ended up being amazed too, because it's reported that they had never experienced so many requests for the videotape of that proceeding. Imagine that. The likes of Bill Benson spoke, Bill Conklin, Larry B. Kraft, myself. We were just asking questions. We were just bringing up evidence, bringing up odd things about the tax and about the way it's administered. And they wouldn't show. Well, Bob's not a man to give up. And if you think he was perturbed that they wouldn't answer me and that they wouldn't show up to his July 1st and 2nd event, he's not one to give up. So he kept at it. And now I've lost track. I believe I've seen some ads that were in the USA Today that keep track of all the attempts we've made to get answers. And we always go to their backyard. They don't have to walk far. They really wouldn't have to spare that many officials. But they continue to refuse to show. And maybe the first time or the second time they could say, we didn't know. Who are these people? They're nothing. But I think they underestimated just how many people have looked at these issues and have questions. And I don't blame people for having questions. Look at the questions I had. And I used to carry a gun and a badge for them. Well, Bob, God bless him, and again, I don't want to take his thunder because he has a tremendous, terrific story for you. But suffice it to say that we have really bent over backwards to get the government officials to answer these questions. And incredible things happened last year. Bob decided, and you know, Bob is just, you're going to love hearing him speak, because he said, he was talking to me on the phone one day and he said, Joe, I'm really angry about this. You know, but he said it in that tone. Yeah, okay, Bob, you sound really angry. But, you know, he must have been. I mean, when he's angry, he doesn't express it, but I mean, it's a measured anger. It's a, you know, hey, something has to be done about this. This isn't right. So I came to find out just how strongly he believed in this cause when he stopped eating. And he told the IRS, he didn't say, I'm not going to eat again until you stop the income tax. I'm not going to start eating again until you know, do my bidding. He simply said, I'm not going to start eating again until you come and answer some questions. Now that is not too much to ask. Well, fortunately, the government officials got concerned that Bob might waste away right there on their doorsteps. And that effort brought the government officials, the Deputy Attorney General, I believe his name is Dan Bryant, the Commissioner, Rosati, to speak to Congressman Roscoe Bartlett. Because Roscoe Bartlett was the only congressman that actually did something, which was to say, you know, Bob, you and these people that you're representing or, you know, acting on behalf of have a right to have these questions answered. It's called a First Amendment right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Redress means response. Redress means, hey, let's get this resolved. And this is wrong. So fortunately, Congressman Bartlett was able to get these officials to commit in writing to show up to a hearing that we had scheduled for September of last year. And if you haven't visited givemeliberty.org, I highly recommend that you do, because you can see the actual memorandum from Congressman Bartlett documenting that the Deputy Attorney General committed to have officials at this proceeding. What happened was, what we came to find out later, was that the Congressman Bartlett, the Department of Justice, and the Internal Revenue Service all backed out of their agreement to come and answer these questions. Complicating matters was that September 11th occurred, and because of the turmoil and all of us wanting to make sure that our country was, we had a country and we were able to defend it, Bob called the congressman and said, perhaps we should postpone this hearing. And Congressman Bartlett agreed, and so we did. And we postponed it to February, and it was in January when Congressman Bartlett backed out, and when it came to light that the Department of Justice and the IRS had actually backed out back in November, and nobody got around to telling us. So I just recently got back from the February hearings. They did occur, contrary to what it says on the Treasury website. On the website it says that the hearings were canceled, and that's all it says. But the hearings did occur, and they were broadcast on the internet, and 2,000 people watched the proceedings live. And we had a panel of experts, and multiple panels of experts. I was honored to be included among the people that testified. We were sworn in. We were all under oath, and we gave answers to, I believe it was close to 500 questions, dealing with the jurisdiction issue, dealing with the 16th Amendment issue, dealing with the enforcement issue, dealing with the authority issue. Those questions are available on the GiveMeLiberty.org website. It was an incredible event to have a man like Paul Chappell. He spent, I believe it was 8 to 10 years as a clerk for the United States Tax Court. He's been an attorney for 30 or 40 years. He was an attorney for the IRS Chief Counsel's office in Washington, D.C. He's on our team. John Turner, 10 years as a revenue officer. His father-in-law was a chief in the collection division. John Turner found out about these issues close to the same time that I did. But because he was a revenue officer and he was constantly issuing liens and levies and those kinds of things, he could only take the job for 2 or 3 months after he found out. Sherry Jackson, she's a certified public accountant too, and she spent, I believe, about 8 years in the IRS as a revenue agent. And fantastic people. And I'd like to see, obviously, I mean, you can kind of get an idea of why the government might not want to show. Larry Beecraft, with all of his knowledge about a wide variety of the issues. Bill Benson, with documentation, irrefutable documentation about the 16th Amendment. It was an incredible event, and not only was it broadcast on the internet, but the proceedings, they're currently being edited and put together, and I believe either on CD and or DVD and or videotape. They will soon be available, and I'm sure Bob can tell you much more about that. But we now have a proceeding whereby the government agreed to show up in writing and broke the agreement. And then you had credentialed, credible witnesses under oath testifying about nearly 500 questions and a mountain of evidence about the federal income tax. And I think that that event was unprecedented. And we really have the We the People Foundation and Bob Scholes to thank for that. In closing, I don't endorse any kind of method or package or anything like that. The IRS can really hurt people, and they can hurt them bad, but they're not doing it within the law. So what I encourage people to do is to educate themselves, do it as inexpensively as possible. If you go to the GiveMeLiberty.org website, you can find an incredible amount of information. And I would highly recommend trying to get a copy of those proceedings. I imagine that the price of those videos and the CDs or whatever is going to be very reasonable, and I'm sure that they're going to be copied, and I hope they get into every American household. But it's very, very important to educate yourselves about this. It seems like by the view of hands that you all are very educated about it. But what's important is to tell other people that it's not. We don't need. The government doesn't need to cheat us and deceive us to collect revenue. And that's what I believe, and that's why I'm speaking up. On the We the People website, there's an incredible plan that's been mapped out, and again, Bob will explain it in greater detail. But it's nice to have a vehicle like that to coalesce, to come together, and to really put pressure on these government officials and let them know that the jig is up. So I thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you all, and I really appreciate all of your efforts, because I know that it's a struggle for each and every person because of the way that the government treats people. And I just want you to know that when I talk to John Turner, Sherry Jackson, Paul Chappell, we all used to work for the IRS, and in Paul's case, he did for decades. But we believe that the agency is doing an incredible wrong to the American people, and we're very confident that the word is spreading like wildfire, and it's going to come to an end. Thank you very much.
Well, folks, Joe, as he mentioned earlier, has to go, but we didn't schedule him to be last on purpose to give the situation. We originally were supposed to leave later, but he informed me that he had some family things he would like to go earlier, so we said, whatever works for you, Joe, as long as it works for the audience, it's fine with us. Tomorrow you're going to hear at the end of the day from Bob Schultz of We the People Foundation a lot more details about what they're doing and what they will be doing in the future and what difference you can make and with the numbers that we're starting to collect in the freedom movement. Just to let you know, the We the People Foundation email list is over 43,000 already. That's a lot for an organization that did not exist in its present form 3 years ago. Okay, so and things are really going, and it really does also again brings into focus why we have to work together. I was at the conference in DC that Joe was saying, and it was such a well done, professional, and complete presentation. I mean, a lot of work went into it by Bob, by Chris Hansen, by Larry Beecraft, by Joe, by Irwin. These guys really put a lot of work into making it happen as it should happen. In fact, it's so good, I'll tell you. We have a supplemental educational material to our courses. We highly recommend everybody gets, like you should. In our packages, includes it. We're going to put that in our package. You want to know about income tax, what it is, what it's not, how it's implemented. You want to get that 2-day educational. I mean, they went through the trouble of getting all these experts in one place, and after months and months of preparation. So I highly recommend you go to their website, GiveMeLiberty.org. and tell your friends and get that education for yourself. And again, this also comes back to also how we got to organize and work together. You know, I want to refer you back to again to Free Enterprise Society, and seriously give consideration to them to becoming a member of the Legal Defense Fund if you haven't already. Can I see show of hands? How many of you are Legal Defense Fund members already in this audience? Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. See, you guys don't know. There's a lot of you Free Enterprise Society members around and Legal Defense Fund members. So we just want you to join us so we can give you better support and mutual protection as well. The dinner, banquet. Yes. We have only 15 tickets left of banquet, okay? We always get a few extras because I know people say, no, I'm not going to come to the banquet. I just want to come to the presentation. Then what happens, people get so excited, they say, oh, this is great. I think I'd like to come to the banquet too. So we got a few extras, but not that much. We have only 15 more dinners available. So if you want to do that, it's on a first come, first served basis. Please go to the front desk and do that. And the speaker, Nick Jessen, is one of the employers who courageously not only took the stance of stopping withholding from the pay of his employees, but he put his face in these USA Today ads in March of 2001, publicly declaring that, yeah, I'm not withholding from the pay of my employees. And the California Franchise Tax Board criminally came after him, not for the years he didn't file, but for the previous years on the lies and frauds of a former employee who is a known thief. You'll learn about that and the criminality of the California Franchise Tax Board, which is worse than the IRS, as many of you know already. But he's a dynamic speaker, and he also ran for governor, unsuccessfully, unfortunately. However, he did educate a lot more people as to what's going on. And so if you want to come to that, if you haven't gotten your ticket, do it here. The banquet is all the way down by the pool. You go out past the lobby, keep going, you go to the pool on your left, Pacific 1 room. That's where it's at. Also, if you missed any of the speakers, or you'd like to hear them again for yourself, or your friend or spouse, someone else that you think, they got to hear this guy, they got to hear Joe, they got to hear Rich, you know, they got to hear Charles Keat, you know, talk about these things. We do have at the Freedom Law School table that pretty lady in red you see there, right there, we have them available on audio tape and CDs, and I understand videos also will be available tomorrow also. You can get them as much as we can get them out, avoid shipping, and get them right away rather than having to wait. So with that, if you don't make it to the banquet tonight, tomorrow, again, we'll be from 9 to 5. You do have the schedule, and I want to thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you all at the banquet at 7 p.m. again. Registration starts at 6:30.